Welcome back. We are back for the second episode of the Care Bear Fantasy Football Weekly Recap. Today we're going to dive into scores, top players, bottom players, some missed starts, injury news. The league board this week had no trades, so we will not be doing any recent trade reviews, though we will pick up on some of the more impactful ones thus far. But before we do all that, let's get into a league recap in the NFL. Thursday night, we kicked off with two top teams from the AFC, both from the AFC West. That division looks good this year. Justin Herbert showed us all, even with broken ribs. He's that guy. Though, too late. Chiefs win 27-24. Coach Staley, you got to get Gerald Everett off the field. He's gassed. Get him out. He wants out. Sunday, we had 7 noon games starting with the Colts versus Duval County. Colts are a joke. 0-1-1, getting shut out 24-0. Matt Ryan looked terrible. The Colts just keep moving on year from year to washed QBs. We have a bit of a dog watch in Jacksonville. Christian Kirk, top 10 receiver right now, went 6 targets, 6 catches, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Consensus number 1 pick in all fantasy leagues, Jonathan Taylor, only 54 yards. Gonna have to keep an eye on that. Also, we have to note, Travis Etienne, everyone's league winner this year. 2 straight games being out-touched by James Robinson, coming off that torn Achilles. That was a 25-12 touch rating. That is not good for Etienne, but James Robinson is back. Next, we had a Pats versus Steelers in a QB mid-off. It didn't look great. Mitch Trubisky, Mac Jones, whatever, 17-14. Pats came up on top. We had a notable game from Nelson Aguilar, 6 targets, 6 catches, 110, and a disrespectful touchdown. He made Ahkello Witherspoon his son. Also, Jacoby Myers, showing he's still Mac's favorite target, getting 13 targets that game. That is something to watch for in fantasy. No touchdowns, that's just what he does. He's that kind of guy. Don't look now, but Brian Daboll, Bills' former OC, new New York Giants head coach, has the Giants at 2-0 after beating the Panthers 19-16. Not much fantasy relevance here, but we do have to mention that Christian McCaffrey only got 19 touches. Is that worrisome? Probably not, because with those 19 touches, he still managed 130 yards. The NFL world everywhere is ecstatic, aside from DC. Dan Campbell, the Detroit Lions head coach, currently has the Lions tied for first in the NFC North. Love to see it. That's America's team. That game was 36-27 in favor of the Lions. Lots of fantasy relevance here. Carson Wentz might be back after his second straight game with over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Scary Terry is falling down the ranks as he looks like he might be receiver 2 on that team, as Curtis Samuel has been out-touching and outperforming him. Also, Jared Goff. Let's talk about that. Is he him? 256 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Now, is he him, or is that just the receivers doing the work? We got to talk about Amon Sun God St. Brown. 9 catches, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, and while he's at it, let him run the ball. 70 rushing yards. Meanwhile, Swift, on only 7 touches, had 87 yards and a touchdown. Big game, big fantasy names coming into there. Following that, we have the Jets. The New York Football Jets, down 13 points with 2 minutes left. Came back behind Joe Flacco. Yes, Joe Flacco. He had 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and ended up beating the Browns 31-30, putting up the 14 points in only 2 minutes. Also, we have to welcome Garrett Wilson to the fantasy football world, as he went 8 catches on 14 targets. That's big. He got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the other side, we had Mr. Full Chubb. Nick Chubb had 100 total yards, 116 total yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's a big game for Mr. Full Chubb. Will he have another one like that? We'll have to see. Amari Cooper has finally arrived in Cleveland after having a terrible week 1. He caught 9 for 10 passes, 100 yards, and a touchdown, though none of that was enough as Old Man Joe took home the win. Down south, we had a fight between the Bucs and Saints. They were going at each other, resulting in Marshawn and Mike Evans both getting ejected from the game. Mike Evans looking like he's going to get a suspension for week 3. More on that. He's appealing today, so we'll see what happens. And I think we all see it. TB12. He's playing as old as he is. 45-year-old man out in the field looks washed. 2 bad games in a row, being carried by that defense. And opposite him on the Saints, we have Chris Olave. You heard me, Olave. 5 catches, 13 targets. We like those targets, but that is not enough catches. And can't guard Mike, gets himself another touchdown. Can't guard him. Then we have the Ravens-Dolphins game. That was quite the thriller. It looked like it was going to be a runaway game for the Ravens heading into the fourth, 35-14. Tua struggled early, but in the fourth quarter, we had 4 Tua Tagovailoa touchdowns. They ended up winning 42-38, and there's a lot of fantasy news to cover here. The Ravens, pay Lamar. It's pay Lamar. 437 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's the starting QB and running back. J.K. Dobbins still isn't back, and Kenyon Drake is not doing anything. It is Lamar. He is the running back and the quarterback. His main target, Mark Andrews, had 9 catches for 104 and a touchdown. As for the Dolphins, after a rough start, looked like a breakaway game, like we said, 35-14. Tua had 2 interceptions early, but he ended the game with 470 and 6 touchdowns. With stats like that, someone has to benefit, right? Tyreek Hill, 11 for 190 and 2. Waddle, 11 for 171 and 2. That's a scary team to face when you have 2 Henry Ruggs type speedsters on the outside. Meanwhile, working on the inside, Gesicki caught a touchdown and then hit the most diabolical gritty on his way to the sideline. That was a good one. Points for the white community everywhere. On to the 5 afternoon games. Let's hit San Fran first, and we are going to take a moment for Trey Lance. All jokes aside, seeing a potential NFL superstar in the making go down with a year-long injury is no laughing matter. Trey Lance broke his ankle in 2 different places, and he's officially out for the year. Jimmy G, he is back. Look for him on the waivers, but this one goes out to Trey. Also, Jimmy G. Can we talk about that guy? He looked very happy to see Trey Lance go down. Something to be said there, but we're not saying it. He came into the game smiling and left the game smiling as the 49ers win 27-7 against the Sea Chickens. Last week, Geno Smith, he didn't write back, but this week, he wrote back as the offense put up no points and the Seahawks' only touchdown coming from a blocked field goal. In fantasy news, Tyler Lockett, he had his signature boom bust game, as last week he did nothing, and this week he had 9 for 107. And then no one San Fran particularly played amazing. No one big in fantasy. Any names? We will mention Tyrion Davis-Price is going to be out for a couple weeks with an ankle injury. Meaning that backfield is down to just Jeff Wilson, Deebo Samuel, Juszczyk, and possibly undrafted rookie Jordan Mason. Staying in LA, we're going to go to the Falcons-Rams game where the Falcons almost broke the internet trying to remake the 28-3 comeback on the opposite side this time. They fell just short as the Rams won 31-27. Drake London, another great week. Looks worthy of the first receiver drafted status. He put up 8 catches, 86 yards and a touchdown on 12 targets, while Kyle Pitts, seemingly invisible with another below 4-point game. That is not what we want to see, as he was supposed to be a top 3 tight end this year. As for the Rams, Cam Akers, Allen Robinson, welcome to the season. Took you an extra week, but they made impacts this week. Akers out-touched Darrell Henderson, but Henderson did outscore him because of that touchdown. Looking more like a running back split than it did week 1. We'll see more on that in coming weeks. And unsurprisingly, the grittiest player in the league, the hardest working player in the league, the first one in, last one out guy in the league. Cooper Kupp had 11 for 108, 2 touchdowns onto technically America's team. Cooper Rush outdueled Joey Burrow and led the boys to a 20-17 win over the fraudulent Bengals. T. Higgins had 6 for 71 and 1, while Pollard, again showing why he should be the RB1 in Dallas, had 98 yards and a touchdown on only 11 touches. Get that man the ball. And even with a backup QB, CD still managed some relevance. He had 11 targets, 7 catches, 75 yards. Meanwhile, in Mile High, we had another mid-off. Mid. Get Nathaniel Hackett out of the head coach position. Broncos beat the Texans 16-9, with some of the only fantasy relevance being that Cortland Sutton went 7 for 122 on 11 targets after Jerry Jeudy went down early. And the last afternoon game was an overtime win for the toddler-led Cardinals, 29-3 over the Vegas Criminals. In a game where nobody stood out fantasy-wise, Kyler Murray made play after play late, just running around, keeping the play up, looking like a toddler in the backfield. Toddler took your phone, can't get it back. They force OT. Hunter Renfrow fumbles twice on the OT drive, and the Cardinals scoop and score for the win. Not a good look for Hunter Renfrow. Sunday night, NFL's oldest rivalry, the Bears versus Green Bay. It looked to be a good game early. The Bears stopped Packers for 3 on the first drive. Bears came down driving. David Montgomery looking good. Bootleg Justin Fields touchdown. It's 7-3. And then the Bears had nothing else to cheer about the rest of the night. It was tough from then on. Game ended 27-10, and that score does not look as bad as the game actually was. David Montgomery, he managed 122 yards on 15 carries. Those are very good averages, good numbers. Aaron Jones, on 18 touches, had 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was a rather harsh punishment by the Bears owner, Aaron Rodgers, Sunday night. Monday night, yesterday, we had a doubleheader, starting with Bills-Titans. And boy, this was over early. After starting off 7-7, the Bills went on a 34-point unanswered run to end the game. We had both quarterbacks out of the game by the third quarter. That is embarrassing for the Titans. Final score is 41-7. Not only did Tannehill check out in the third, but Henry checked out in the third. And man, Henry has fallen off. That guy had 1.9 yards per carry. He looked pitiful. He did not look good. He did not look like his old self whatsoever. Bad day for Derrick Henry owners. Meanwhile, Josh Allen, 317 yards, 4 touchdowns, seemingly all to Stephon Diggs, who had 12 catches, 150 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Talk about a stat line. Game was over before it started. That spread to start the game was 9.5. They won by 34. And the last game of the week, Eagles-Vikings, 2 assumed NFC powerhouses after good week ones, both on the offensive and defensive side of the balls. This game was over at half. Literally, not a single point was scored in the second half. Final score 24-7 Eagles. Jalen Hurts, 390 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and he threw the ball to everyone after last week, just force-feeding A.J. Brown. He was spacing it out. Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, A.J. Brown, everybody was getting involved. And on the other side, Kirk did the Kirk thing. He had 3 interceptions, and his main target, Darius Slay? That can't be right. On the points this week, we have to address our Week 2 shit king, and that is Ryan being our lowest scorer at 116 points, and so far that is this year's lowest score, being Justin last week. He had multiple single-digit scores. He did have Trey Lance. Again, sad to see that happen, but injuries happen. Never want to root for him, though. Opposite that, we have the high score of the week, and we have Reggie of the South Memphis Taint Destroyers. Still love that name. He put up 186 points. That is this year's highest score so far. He started 5 players with over 20 points, leading to this week's blowout of the week. Our low score, Ryan, was beat by Bailey by 60 points, our highest differential yet. And there was no game of the week this week as we had no close games, no nail biters. Johnny beat Craig 164-140. Tommy beat Andrew 176-150. And Reggie beat Jews 186-155. Again, we'll keep an eye on this, but our closest game of the year was 3.5 points between Andy and Ryan in week 1. On to our top players of the week. Ravens, please pay Lamar Jackson. He had 43 points for Bailey. Some names to mention at the QB spot also include Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa as the only other QBs to top 30 points. Our running back of the week, the Chubb, was full. Oh, Jesus. The Chubb was full with 32.3 points for Ryan. Also, Aaron Jones being a close second with a 32 flat score. Receiver 1, Stephon Diggs, 45 points for Tommy. That is this week's highest score. Receivers I mentioned include Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They had over 40. And also Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp, and Amon-Ra all over 30 points. The receivers look good this year. And that no running back strategy is starting to look better and better as the year goes on. Tight end 1, Mark Andrews, 26 for Mr. Johnny Glynn. And overall, tight ends had a much better week than the first week. We had 13 other tight ends score over 10 points. And 10 points for tight ends, that's pretty solid. Our defense one of the week was Tampa Bay Brady Carriers with 25 for Jews, while the Bills also had over 20 fantasy points. That is very, very solid for defenses. And now we're going to look at the exact opposite. We have the lows of the week, and for this we're looking strictly at players that were started. Obviously, we're not going to look at guys on the bench because our GMs of the league, they made the smart decision. They left those guys on the bench, and we're not looking at guys on the waiver wire because they are not on teams for a reason. At our QB, technically we have Trey Lance with 2.5 points, but as we said earlier, injuries suck. We're not looking at injured players. So our bottom QB of the week is Captain Kirk, who had 8.8 points for Andy. Closely following was Tom Brady, as the only other started QB in the league have under 10 points. Next at running back was Chase Edmonds with only 5 points for myself. Likewise, other started running backs to put up under 10 points. That is not good for a running back. James Conner, he got injured. Lenny Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Javonte Williams. It is no longer King Henry for the rest of the season until proven otherwise. We will be calling him Peasant Henry, under 10. Dalvin Cook, JT, Travis Etienne, AJ Dillon, Josh Jacobs. Again, just not a good week for running backs. At the wideout, we have Jerry Jeudy with a 2.2. Again, we don't like injuries here, so we look to all started receivers under 10, which were a handful, but none of them too low, all of them around 8 or 9 points. We had Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, and Adam Thielen. Tight ends, we saw Dalton Schultz score 1.8 for Bailey, though close behind was Pitts with another 3.9 and Hawkinson 5.6. And lastly, as we say, defense wins championships, so it does not look good for the Colts, who allowed 24 points to the Jags and scored a whopping 0 points for Johnny. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have no trade reviews for the week, but we are going to look back on some rather impactful trades thus far. To start, Ryan and myself swapped Christian Kirk and Brandon Cooks, which is looking in my favor so far, as Christian Kirk is receiver 7 on the year and Brandon Cooks has fallen out of the top 30. Though it is only week 2, we will see what happens from that. Next off, we have the trade of the year thus far in the league. Devontae Adams, Travis Kelce, and Leonard Fournette for JT and Mike Evans. This week, it proved to not matter too much, as Adams, Kelce, and Lenny only combined for 30, while JT and Evans only scored 18. So it's about a 10-point average and a 9-point average. Not a big gap, not much differential there, but we are looking at a week 3 suspension for Evans, so week 3 that trade could look really bad. And then we move on to another trade with Tommy and myself. I traded him Kyle Pitts for Courtland Sutton. So far unsuccessful for Pitts, as he has had back-to-back 3.9-point games, whereas Courtland Sutton is currently slated as a top 20 receiver. Then we got a Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes swap between Bailey and myself. Looking in favor of Jalen Hurts, as he is currently QB3 and Mahomes is QB6. And then we have a trade with Reggie and Tommy with Darren Waller and David Montgomery, essentially. Chase Claypool was involved in the trade, but he's kind of irrelevant, kind of a fluffer in the trade. That is so far in favor, just slightly in favor of Reggie and Darren Waller, as he has outscored David Montgomery by 6 points. Now we're going to look at some players who had big weeks, but unfortunately, they rode the bench. Tough. For this, we're going to name any players on benches with over 20 points. And this week we had quite a few. And then all rankings that I may mention as like QB2 or receiver 5, anything like that. That is for this week alone. So we are talking about week 2 this week. And to start off, we have Johnny benching Amari Cooper. He had receiver 9 status this week, a top 10 receiver being benched. Craig, myself, I left 75 points on the bench between QB2 Tua, RB3 Pollard, receiver 13 Bateman. Tough week as I took a loss. Wonder why. Tommy left rookie breakout Drake London, this week's receiver 10, on the bench. Andrew also left a rookie receiver on the bench. He left Garrett Wilson, who had 30. What a game. Receiver 6 this week. And lastly, we look at our whole league, as we had multiple players on the waiver wire score over 20. And these guys are unrostered. Go ahead and get at them. We have old man Joe Flacco, Jared Goff, Nelson Aguilar, Curtis Samuel, and Noah Brown. Again, all of them over 20 and not on a roster. What are we doing, guys? We got to get at them. On some quick injury news, Dalton Schultz, questionable PCL issue. Kamara, questionable ribs. Godwin, still questionable with hammy. Dobbins is still listed as week to week, recovering from that ACL tear last year. And as we mentioned earlier, Trey Lance out for the year with a broken ankle. He had a successful surgery, though. Hope to see him back next year. Mike Evans, looking right now at a week 3 suspension. Again, that's being appealed, but that suspension is for being a blindsiding bitch. Jeez, Lattimore owns this guy. Julio still listed as questionable with sore knee. Pittman still questionable with that quad injury. Renfro questionable with a concussion. Kittle still questionable with the groin, looking at a week 3 comeback, hopefully. Got to get him back soon. That's supposed to be a top 5 tight end, and he has not played yet. Not likely. Do not like that. Dak, some new injury news. They're expecting him back as soon as week 4. What initially came out as 6 to 8 weeks is now saying week 4 comeback. Can that be another case of Russell Wilson last year, where he came back and was just not the same player? Hope not for him. Hope not for myself. Big Eagles, man. Jerry Jeudy, questionable with the shoulder. Keenan Allen, questionable with a hammy still. James Conner got an ankle injury this week, questionable. Gabe Davis did not play last night, in a bit of a surprise, questionable with an ankle injury. And lastly, Justin Herbert, someone to look at. He is questionable with a rib injury. And that doctor that stabbed Tyrod Taylor, he still has a job in LA. Better watch out, Justin Herbert. Under the league board, we have some announcements around the league. Andy is saying the whole team is tradable, and Ryan also saying that, as both of them are 2 of our lowest scores throughout 2 weeks. Ryan has a message for the league: as a disappointment of a week shadows my mind, just know every great comeback starts with a losing story. That's great, buddy. Tommy, through the power of God, titties in America, I don't have to kill myself. He did say last week that if he loses, he's going to kill himself. He won. He's not going to kill himself. That being said, if I don't score 200 next week, I'm smashing my balls in a door jam. You better watch out for those balls, as no one has scored 200 yet through 2 weeks, but we will see. Myself, I'm announcing Tom Brady, Rashad Bateman, and Tony Pollard all as tradable. And then we have a quick word from Mr. James Draws on TikTok. This is a shout out from Ryan. I just want to play this one real quick, so let's see what we got.
Chicago Bears, what happened? How to lose to Green Bay Packers? See you next.
I mean, he has a point. I mean, what are we doing, guys? How are we losing to the Green Bay Packers? We saw how they played in week 1. They didn't look great. But, yeah, that was a word from James Draws. Shout out Ryan for that one. He just wanted to put that out there. And now lastly, we're going to look ahead at week 3 for both our fantasy league and the NFL as a whole. We have Little Uzi Hurts, my team, playing Reggie's South Memphis Tank Destroyers. Reggie, one of the 2-0 teams left. He's hoping to stay undefeated. I'm hoping to take him down. We have Bailey, the other 2-0 team, the McAfrican Americans, playing Andrew's Ayahuasca Army. Andrew's still looking for that first win. We'll see. Hopefully he can pull it out. Hopefully he can take Bailey down. That'd be something to see if we have no undefeated teams left by week 3. Then we have Juice's team, Team Laporte, playing Johnny's 4 Loco for Life. 2 1-1 teams there. We're going to see who comes out on top. Lastly, Tommy's Raisin with Rugs plays Matt Areza's Party. All right. Not much to say with that one. That's going to be 2 mid teams. Around the league on Thursday night, we will see the Steelers and Cleveland in a AFC North mid-off. Sunday morning, we have 9 games. We have Texans in Chicago, another mid-off. Raiders in Tennessee, both teams trying to win their first game, though Raiders have looked much better than Tennessee has in their first 2 games. Tennessee hoping to bounce back after being completely embarrassed Monday night. Chiefs in Indianapolis in what could be Frank Reich's last game as the Colts head coach. That's just a joke, but you never know. Frank Reich starting out the year 0-1-1, and the Chiefs are the Chiefs. That could be a tough one for the Colts there. Then we have Bills in Miami in this week's game of the week. Look to expect lots of week 3's top scorers coming out of this game. We have 2 high-powered offenses going at each other in Miami. We'll see what happens there. We have America's team, Detroit Lions, going to Minnesota for a battle of the NFC North. Whoever wins there is going to be 2-1 and essentially either in first or tied for first, as the entire NFC North is currently 1-1. Ravens hoping to bounce back from that brutal comeback that they faced against the Dolphins in Foxborough against Mac Jones and the Patriots. Bengals praying to win in New York against the Jets, but we all remember the Mike White game last year. Come on now. And who's to say Joe Flacco isn't better than Mike White? That could be a tough one for the Bengals. They could start the year off 0-3 after being in the Super Bowl last year. Wouldn't want to see that. The Eagles are in D.C. looking to demoralize Carson Wentz, as they did the same to Jalen Reagor last week. Man, those boos were tough every time he was on the field to get a punt. Fans do not like old Eagles players when they leave on bad terms. And the last noon game has the Saints going to Carolina in another mid-off. 2 pretty mid quarterbacks just going at each other. Probably going to be a low-scoring game, but you never know. The afternoon slate has the Jaguars hoping to upset LA against an injured Herbert and the Chargers. The Rams looking to take control of the West as they visit the Desert and Murray's Cardinals, but we'll see what that little toddler can do. He always likes to make plays early in the season. The Falcons are going to Seattle in another mid-off. Packers going to Tampa Bay in a battle of angry old white men. We'll see whose defense can carry them harder, as both quarterbacks look to have fallen from grace, and neither of them look like their old selves. But that's expected. They're pretty old. Sunday night, the familiar face of Jimmy G is back. Everyone loves seeing Jimmy G, and he is going to lead the 49ers into Denver to play Russ and the Broncos. And lastly, Monday night, the undefeated. Yeah, I said that right. The undefeated Giants are hosting Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. That's probably going to be a pretty low-scoring, defense-orientated game in New York, but you never know what could happen. Cooper Rush could blow up. If he plays as good as his name sounds, Cowboys are looking to win that game. And that's all we got for this Tuesday. We will see you next week.